Yeah, you wrote me an email where you texted me what Voice of San Diego is exactly. You said it's the first online local news non-profit organization. You started that in 2005, and why? What was the reason for that?
Well, I didn't start it. I was there was a venture capitalist named Buzz Woolley and a longtime columnist at the major newspaper in San Diego called Neil Morgan, and he had just gotten fired. He'd been there like 50 years. You know, one of those guys, if you fire him, you should give him a watch or something, and hold a party for him, do something. But they just told him to leave. He'd been there so long, and Buzz Woolley invited him, the capitalist invited him to come, and they met, and they decided they wanted to start something new. And they kind of made a calculation that they wanted to be able to make it as professional as possible, efficient as possible. They didn't want to start a print publication. Decided they wanted to staff it, and so they did it online. They chose a nonprofit model because they felt like the nonprofit model would allow them as many different sources of revenue as possible to provide it, and then they wanted to make it professional. So we weren't the first nonprofit, we weren't the first local online, but we were the first nonprofit local online investigative journalism outlet that focused on investigative reporting and explanatory reporting. So we're either trying to find something out or explain why something is the way that it is.
Mm-hmm. And what were the first steps? What did you do first, or your colleagues?
Well, I can do the whole story. There was basically there was a leadership crisis, and I took over about 7 months after we started. My friend and I became co-editors, and this was 2005, so this is right when Facebook was starting and everything. And what we decided to do is we made two sort of central insights about what we should sort of establish, which was that we weren't going to cover anything unless A, we could do it better than anyone else, or B, no one else was doing it. That there was no point in having a nonprofit, specialized investigative news source that just duplicated what everybody already did, right? And so we worked really hard to make sure that everything we did added value. Now, obviously, sometimes we would cover something that somebody else was covering, and we wouldn't do it better, but that would be the point. That was what we were always striving for. After a while, we started to really have some success. We uncovered some corruption at a government agency, hundreds of thousands of dollars embezzled. And after that, the New York Times came and did a big profile about us. So ironically, we got a tremendous amount of validation from a print publication that came to visit us, and they put us on the front page. And that was in 2008, and that became our sort of we call it a New York Times Day. We call it our New York Times Day because after that, we got covered by dozens and dozens of places, including German newspapers, Japanese newspapers, The Economist. They all came to do stories about it because you remember at that time, the newspaper industry was starting to show some serious decline. There were newspapers actually shutting down in the United States. There was a recession hitting, and we were being treated as this model of what could be done instead. It was actually getting kind of uncomfortable how much they were highlighting us and how much they were making a big deal out of us. And they all got something wrong. That was my first experience being covered by newspapers and by journalists so much. They all got something wrong, which was that they thought that we had gotten created to respond to the economic crisis in journalism, when in fact I think that we were such an important model for that because we were created not because of that. We were created for a San Diego specific problem. In 2005 and 4, newspapers were actually very strong businesses. They were making tons of money. They were selling as companies for a lot of money. And you know, when they started Voice of San Diego, they just wanted to start it to solve a problem in San Diego of a lack of competitive media. And I think trying to find the simplest, most efficient way to create competitive investigative journalism is what led them to the model that they did, which became a model that now 150 or more other organizations in the country are doing. We helped create the Institute for Nonprofit News, which is sort of the trade organization that supports dozens and dozens of our partners around the country.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say, what's your mix of issues you're reporting on?
Okay, so I just spent the morning today answering some questions from a woman who was mad about an email we sent out. So a few months ago, we established our basic "What We Stand For" document. So it was my dream for many years to agree with our board and our staff and to come with an agreement that we could print out to the public and say, these are the values of what we stand for. Because I believe there's a huge problem in the press right now of lack of trust. And part of that, I think, is due to their suspicion that we have certain values, we have certain opinions, and we're not transparent about them. And so I produced this list of the 6 or 8 most important values we have. So,
yeah, can you tell us briefly what they are?
Is that a new tab? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what I was going to get. So we released this in December, and it became kind of big news in our little world. So some of them are not really controversial: government transparency, a well-informed, well-educated community, high-quality education for all children. So we focus on investigative journalism for making sure that if there's a bad school, that it's being dealt with, if there's cheating in schools, that it's being dealt with, if there's financial problems in schools, or if there's a lack of equity in schools. There's a lot of problems in our country, and in San Diego in particular, where there's very wealthy schools doing very well, and public schools in the same district in very poor areas not doing very well, not getting the leadership and accountability they deserve. So we do a lot of investigative work on that. High quality housing that's affordable to all residents, world-class infrastructure that supports free enterprise and job creation, robust arts and culture, and preparations for a long-term drought, energy supply, and climate change. So climate change one was probably our most controversial one to just sort of establish. But we believed it was really important to say, you know, these are the things we care about. We live in San Diego. We're not going to hide the fact that we care about the environment and roads and housing and schools, but we will investigate and explain things about them, but at that point you can argue and debate them. So when we established that, so those are the topics we care most about. And the reason I got some angry emails is we use that as part of our fundraising now to send out. And a lot of people angry with some of the stories we've done, you know, shot back and said, why can't you just be objective? Well, I have a lot of thoughts about objectivity. Basically, when we cover something, as everybody well knows, we're making subjective decisions about what's important, what's not important, what we value. Corruption's bad, murder's bad, you know, things are bad, and those are what color and inform our journalism all the time. And I just felt it was very important to establish what are the things that we're going to be outraged about. And when we expose things about that, we can be neutral and objective about the solutions that are put forward to deal with them. And we have supporters on all sides of the spectrum, left, right, center, and that's our board as well and our staff. But we don't want to pretend like there's not something going on that really fires us up. And as you all know too, journalists are the most productive they can be when they're passionate, when they're fired up about something, when they've discovered something that they know that people will react to. And so I wanted to give them the mandate to react to things. And I think that in the United States, at least, one of the problems that journalists have is they tackle small problems. And I wanted to really get them fired up about tackling the big problems.
Okay. How do you set yourself apart from traditional media?
So we have a sort of feisty way of writing. We try to write conversational style. But also, we're not just online. We call ourselves both revenue and platform promiscuous. So it's revenue promiscuity is a term that actually came up out of Texas Tribune. So the idea being we're trying to get money from as many different sources as possible, but also we're trying to reach people from as many different places as possible. So we have a partnership with NBC, the broadcast affiliate in San Diego. We produce 2 segments a week with them, and they pay us for that. We have a podcast that's more and more popular every week. Really proud of that. That airs on a radio station in town as well. We have a partnership with another radio station, and all of our stories appear in print, either in our own magazine or in local newspapers that are allowed to print them. And so we don't really see ourselves as competitive to the rest of the news world in San Diego. We try to be like an agent that can help all of them. There is some competitive angles with the reporters, obviously competing for stories, or just that you can't tell a reporter to always be cooperative with their rivals in town. But our goal is to really be a part of the whole system, a real part of the ecosystem, as opposed to a fighter, a competitor in it. Now that people do get upset about us, and we can throw a few elbows here and there, but it's a fun thing. So we're platform agnostic. We're really one of the ways that we're able to do social media a little different is, rather than just use social media for Facebook and Twitter to get clicks to come to our site, it's my mandate to the staff that they use those platforms to do reporting, to do educational work as much as they want, and not just try to lure people to the site. Because as a nonprofit, I don't really care if they come to this site. I care if our brand and our mission and our donate button get to these other platforms. And frankly, some of those platforms, well, all those platforms work better than our site. So I should just not pretend like I can compete with Facebook. I should use Facebook as best I can to inform the public. So one of the things that we also believe is that we're kind of an educational academy in a way. There's a lot of people that will say like San Diego or American voters are really apathetic. It's my opinion that that apathy is derived from their simple misunderstanding of how anything works. That they don't know what the Port of San Diego is. They don't know how the school board works. They don't know myriad things about what is how the city works and how it is how you can run for office, or how the elections work, or what the agendas say. I mean, these agendas are written in this very difficult jargon. And so we see our role as not only finding things out, but also serving as an on-ramp so that people can, if they care about local things, they can come to our world and watch it. You know how you can watch a soap opera? You may never have seen it, but you can start watching it for 3 days and you'll know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I really see our role as for local public affairs is, all right, we're not going to follow like the gossip and the sex and stuff, but we can like help you follow these incredible, interesting stories and trying to serve as the on-ramp for getting into them.
And how much journalism can you do? Is it only managing, or can you still journalism?
I have to, or I would die. Sorry, it's a little hot. I do the podcast every week. I try to write a column or a story about every week or two. And every time I meet with somebody who in the community who wants to support us or who just wants to talk, or they all just want to talk about the stuff we cover and the issues we do. And so I think of it as my role to be kind of like the head storyteller of the organization, to go and speak to community meetings, to appear on radio and TV. So I do one of the TV segments. My staff produces the stories, and then I organize it in what we call the Friday 5 segment on NBC. I can pull that up, but anyway, so I do this, it's a brand new segment we started with them. I switched it. I used to do the fact check with them, and we switched it to the Friday 5, where I run through our 5 most biggest stories of the week really fast. So my point being, I'm trying to be like the head storyteller anchor maybe of the whole operation, just to try to take all their stories and really boil them down into one thing. What we realized our most popular product is the morning report we send out every day, which is a real conversational storytelling experience where we try to help people understand everything. Like that's that soap opera place where you can go and catch up on all the stories. Sorry, I should have had this. There we go. So, yeah, that's.
Yeah, do you want to show it?
We can.
Yeah.
Now to our News Writing segment in partnership with Voice of San Diego, where we highlight the top local topics of the week.
Can you maybe turn up the volume a bit?
California State Senate approved a bill, SB 54, that prohibits law enforcement from spending money to enforce federal immigration laws. Right now, 18 agents from enforcement and removal operations work inside San Diego's 3 main jails, 24/7. This bill would kick them out. It still has to get through the Assembly and Governor, though. Number 2, when I was in high school, I didn't cheat, I just did badly. Cheating's easier now, though. 20% of the 16 graduating class at San Diego Unified School District took online classes. The district uses a company called Edgenuity. Voice of San Diego's Mario Coran visited East Village High, where students and teachers showed him how to cheat those online classes. Students can look up answers to quizzes on Google. One girl showed us how you can just type in gobbledygook to get through an assignment. When the Union Tribune called to follow up, the district dismissed the concerns as anecdotal. Number 3, a group hostile to people renting out their whole home to vacationers is handing out these. Violators will be prosecuted. The San Diego City Attorney recently decided that vacation rentals are illegal, but the mayor chose not to refer them for prosecution. Both leaders want a compromise. Save San Diego Neighborhoods explained to me what prosecution on those signs means. Neighbors are taking vacation rental owners to small claims court. Number 4, the San Diego City Clerk announced that the Soccer City plan to develop land at Qualcomm Stadium qualified for the ballot. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulkner endorsed the initiative and secured new promises from supporters, but new foes have emerged. We knew SDSU was against it, rival developers too, and this week the city attorney criticized it. And a leader of construction unions in town called it, quote, Sucker City on Twitter. The big question is, when will the vote be? The Labor Council wants it pushed to 2018. And soccer guys say that would be too late. Number 5, that election date matters for the mayor's plan to increase hotel room taxes to expand the convention center.
What are the reactions from the audience to
Well, people have been great about it, so it's a chance for us to summarize our biggest stories of the week, and for me to kind of work is to turn our work into a weekly sort of experience too, so that people could follow it in whatever way they wanted to.
So you were talking about donations.
Mm-hmm.
How big is your annual budget?
Okay, so our budget this year is $1.8 million. We get 5 sources of revenue. So we have 2,800 members right now. That's our record members. So what I was doing this morning is writing a member report that we send out as often as I get around to it, which is a list of not only sort of insights to the news, but also things about how our organization is working. So one of our main approaches is to try to tell our story really well, so that people follow it as a sort of soap opera as well. And so our people leaving, our people coming, our reporters, and they're switching beats and stuff, we try to tell that in a way that people want to follow it and they want to help us. So our membership is 2,800 members. That's about 25% of our revenue. We have foundation supporters, major foundations. There's 2 types that really support us: national foundations and local foundations. And we approach those quite differently. Our third part is corporate sponsors, so what might be called advertisers, underwriters of our programs. On our podcast, we'll talk about them. We'll tell who brought the podcast to you, that sort of thing. And our Fourth is the revenue we get from partners like NBC or some of the other people that pay to run our stores. And the goal is to really boost that membership up. So one of the things, about 5 years ago, we had a pretty serious financial crisis where I was a new executive. I didn't make very good long-term financial plans and didn't really have the support that I needed, and we were forced to lay off a few reporters. I don't know about here, but in the United States, if you lay off somebody at a hotel or at a bank or something, it's not that big a deal, but you lay off journalists and it's the biggest news in the country. We had, especially because we had been highlighted for so many years as this, darling success story, after I had to lay off some reporters, it became this national sort of news about, oh, maybe they don't really have their act to go. And one of the things that's why it always bothered me is like, we don't have any perfect answer for the future of journalism, but so after that, we really got focused on clarifying the different sources of revenue that we could get, how we were going to go about maximizing each one each year, and then really building out that membership program. So we developed a system of emails and Salesforce customer relations database and donation software. We developed a system that really works really well together and built that membership up. Last year, for example, we lost about $600,000 in grants that we were hoping to get, but our membership went up 40%. So we're going through this extraordinary diversification of our revenue, and it's based on that membership push. And our goal is to get that membership up to about 10,000. And that membership is anybody who gives us money from $35 a year to $5,000 a year. So I know that one of the things I was nervous about talking about is because I don't, every time I talk to international audiences, the culture of philanthropy that exists in our country is a lot different than in Europe or South America or even Mexico right next to us. And so I have a hard time communicating why that's maybe easier for us or something. But yeah, there's a lot of people who give 5, 10. We just got 40,000 this year from somebody who just popped on our screen. And they're passionate about, and they're starting to recognize that supporting journalism is as important as supporting a museum or a university or an opera or something like that. And so it's become part of the cultural philanthropy community in San Diego. And so
but what do you think? Why should someone donate? What's the reason? What do you think?
Guilt. So basically, in my opinion, every single news organization in the United States, at least newspaper and sort of heavy, thoughtful stuff, they're all switching, maybe not magazines as much, but most of them are switching to getting money from readers, right? And in our country, that's gone two ways. One is the subscriptions, right? People pay to access the content or some sort of paywall. Have those gotten big here, or? Yeah. So, yes, right. So that seems to be working for like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, these giant publications with these giant readership, communities. And so a little bit of money from each one of those readers, or a portion of them, is a significant amount of money. For us, or for local organizations, that presents a much bigger problem because the number of people willing to pay a lot of money, $100 or $200 a year, for that content is really not that significant of a group of people. And everybody's hitting that, right? Everybody's marching towards that cliff where the revenue from their print and other revenues hits the point where it's no longer worth printing the paper. And so all newspapers are marching towards that cliff, and nobody knows what's going to happen when it comes. And my opinion is that our only hope, and what we've been working on for 6-7 years, is our only hope is that when that cliff hits, that we have turned to readers and created ways for them to support us with such breadth and so many people doing as much as they can that they can pay for us. And so what we do is basically tell our story as much as we can without annoying people, and making it clear to them that if they want us to keep doing the stories that they appreciate, Or if we do a special one that says, hey, we need to raise $50,000 for this project, will you help make that happen? It's our opinion that they'll step up, and they do. Unfortunately, it's still only about, so NPR, our public radio network in the United States, they run on an assumption that about 7 to 12% of their loyal audience will donate. So a very small portion. Obviously, when they have millions, that's a significant number of people. When you take that to our model, then that would mean if we have 2,800 members, that would mean we have a loyal audience of maybe 30,000 people, and that's not enough. So our goal is to get that up to maybe a community about 150,000, which is the same number of people who would vote in a special election in San Diego. And then we can, if we get 10,000 members and they're giving an average of $100, with some giving 5,000, 10,000 more, that we can cobble that together to be about double the size of what we are now. That's going to be hard to do, but I believe that it's extremely important that readers recognize that if they value this work, this is the only way it's going to thrive and survive is if they invest in it. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of journalists, I think. Journalists have been isolated, at least in the United States, from the responsibility to promote and talk about why they do what they do and explain to people why it's so important. And that freedom's gone now. They have to, and even with our younger journalists, it's very hard to get them to recognize their role in talking about why it's so important to do what they do and why the people who value it should pay for it. But it really is a social responsibility, almost like a voluntary tax or something.
Just one question about the membership program you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one question is how do you, which methods do you use to get more members? And the other question is, what is the difference between your members and, let's say, subscribers of newspaper?
Yeah. Well, so the best thing that we've come up with to get more members is to reach more people, and we created what's called a funnel. So we have at the top, we call it the score. So it's the number of people who sign up to follow us in our newsletters. It's the number of people who follow us on social media. We do an index weighted, so Facebook and Twitter followers make up about 7% of that index. So we divide that into the Facebook followers and reach on that. Anyway, we compile that along with website visitors and people who subscribe to our various newsletters. So there's our morning report, there's our, we do a member report, the border report on the border, the cultural report on the arts and culture in the city. So the number of people who subscribe to that. And so what we do, we set targets every week about how that's going to grow and what we're going to do to reach people to get those numbers to grow. And then we have a conversion process. So once they sign up or they follow us on Twitter, within a few days they get a note saying, you should donate if you think this is worth it. Here's why you should. Here's the benefits. So they can, they get our member report. They can come to events for free that we have. They can get any number of different. Look, they're not huge benefits, a mug or something, but they're part of a club that we're trying to more clearly define. We have member coffees we do every month where I sit with the reporters and listen to the community. We do it at different parts of the community, and those are sometimes 60, 100 people there that want to talk about, that want to understand the events. Because we believe, like, journalism isn't just something you write and then be done with. Like, it really is an educational experience. It should be a conversation, a podcast, anything that can help get that information across. So getting those numbers bigger, we've got to build that funnel bigger. We got to reach more people. What we're doing right now is breaking down the type of people who still aren't engaged with us that should be, and we've created personas for them, and we're repackaging our content. So if we do a big story, we'll post the story, and then we'll repackage it in different ways and then target those people on Facebook or on Twitter or somewhere else where we can actually get them to understand that issue as well. So it might not be the full story that they want to consume, but maybe it's a social graphic that helps them understand it, or a video, or an event in their neighborhood. And the goal is to get that funnel bigger and then convert more of it. So we have a whole email program that we use to, if you've signed up for our morning report, within a few weeks you get a note that says, okay, you've been reading for a while, you should donate, here's why you should feel bad if you don't, you know. I joke about the guilt, but it's really important that they recognize that they have this role. And I'm not altogether comfortable with that's the best way to make a deal. I would love to be part of an organization that had some sort of subscription thing that people just bought because they loved it so much and it was that big. But right now, I can't turn down somebody who may want to be able to give me $5,000 or more and in exchange just do something where they only pay like $150 for the subscription, right? So that's the situation a lot of local investigative public entities like us are going through. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cox and Louis. My name is Olale Akantala. I just want to ask you some few questions. Why did your platform, why did you choose to be a non-profit media organization? And do you think the goal of sustaining the projects, is it very feasible? And is it like a penetration strategy into the media markets that you chose to be a non-profit making media organization? Are you just using that to cash on your audience, or what is the motive behind? I mean, behind every news media is the goal of merchandising. So why did you choose to be a not-for-profit organization?
So I didn't choose it. I came on as a writer after they had launched. The reason that they did was they wanted to come up with a way to get as many different sources of revenue as possible. When you're a for-profit, you have two sources of revenue. You can charge for subscriptions, or you can sell ads, right? And they recognized, I think wisely, years ago, that that the ad market was troubled. And so the next thing about subscriptions, like I said, for a subscription model to work, and I really do think it would be wonderful, you need a vast breadth of people who are willing to pay for it. So if you're dependent on subscriptions, you know, at $100 a piece, you're going to need like 18,000 subscriptions right away to pay for our system. The nonprofit model in the United States allows people to give significant dollars for tax benefits. It allows people to, companies to sponsor in different ways for tax benefits. It allows people to donate as much as they want. Personally, it allows everything that a for-profit model allows except for profit taking. I'm not one of those who says that nonprofit is more holy or true than for-profit. I would love to be part of a profitable for-profit, great news organization. There's no problem with that. I do think, though, in the United States, in order to be a for-profit, you have to have a mission, and the mission has to be approved by the the IRS, and then that mission is guarded by the board members. There's nobody who actually owns the nonprofit. The board members oversee it, and their job is to protect that mission. And so I think it is healthy for a news organization to have a mission, to be very clear. So ours is this is what we added to why we care about San Diego stuff, but ours is to do groundbreaking investigative journalism and to help people be advocates for good government by giving them the information they need to do it. So that mission, I think, is really important, because I think what you're seeing right now is a lot of journalism organizations trying to figure out how to reach more people, and so they're doing a lot of things like they're doing dumb things that are like gossipy or clicky to attract people to their content, in the hopes that they'll reach they'll explore the more in-depth and intelligent stuff when they get there, right? And I think, you know, we're prohibited by our mission and by our board from doing, you know, things that don't matter. And what that forces us to do is to take the things that matter and make them more interesting. And so I think there's really good benefits that come from having that mission and that board enforcing it. That said, I really would love to see people do more experimentation with local for-profit investigative outlets. Like in LA, there's all these billionaires that are talking all the time about purchasing the LA Times and who should buy it and who should buy it this time and who should buy it next. And I wish that one of them would just stop and launch a cool for-profit online site that did some great stuff, that used everything we know about how you can make money online, subscriptions and different types of sponsorships and such, and events, and pulled that all together and did an awesome company. I would love to see that, but it's just not happening. And I'm terrified about what's going to happen to our country, because there's so many parts of our country that are becoming news deserts, where there's just literally no smart reporting going on. And I'm sure that, you know, there's in San Diego, there's an area, South Bay, San Diego, there's 500,000 people that live there, 4 cities, countless school districts, city councils, school boards, and water districts. Water is a very big deal in California. And they don't get any coverage. They don't get any investigative coverage. And I'm afraid that when the next recession comes, there's going to be the dissolving of the newspapers that exist. It's going to be horrifying. And there's not going to be any experimentation in the meantime to build new for-profit models that help pick up some of the slack. Sorry. Yeah?
I read a few weeks ago that one of the problems of local press in America disappearing was that there were no papers anymore left that printed articles from, let's say, Washington Post, New York Times on national matters and international matters. Mm-hmm. So the people in, for instance, San Diego are not only deprived from local news, but from good national news as well. Do you have any plans, if you get the funding and if you can expand, to join forces with national newspapers and become bigger in that sense? Mm-hmm. So not become just local, but... Yeah.
Let me just answer, your second question was about sustainability real quick. Just a reminder. So, well, we've been going...
So, let me add this one. So, they now, it's press freedom guarantee. You have like a wide area of sponsors.
I have what?
Wide area of sponsors.
Uh-huh.
People trying to contribute grants or whatsoever. So how, I mean, at some point, interests will definitely clash.
Yes.
So how do you now, I mean, stay afloat as expected of a media house to be independent?
Okay, so I'll do the sustainability one first.
Yeah.
So look, there's no guarantee of sustainability. Like any small business, people can't project that they're going to be fine in 3 years, right? We've been around 12 years now, so I think that's a good indication that we're still going. But I'm not going to guarantee anybody's perfectly that we're fine and whatever. I think that we're at the point where no matter what happens, we'll still go. It's just, you know, we might have to go up and down as we go there. I'll do yours, this one. The national, I actually don't perceive that to be a huge problem. I think that part of what we have too much of is that as the TV stations and newspapers have gone down, they're passing along too much national news and not doing enough locally to engage there. They're losing the local reporters and filling that gap with national wire copy and such. So I don't perceive that to be a huge problem, although as some of these people lose their newspaper subscriptions, yes, they're not seeing some of this national content, and in exchange, they're substituting that for the Facebook friends sharing type stuff, mm-hmm. which can be, as you know, great, but horrible too. So yeah, it's a huge problem that sort of backbone of the news industry has fallen apart. We would never, our baseline philosophy is that we're never going to be something that we just pass something along from somebody else. That we figure that the news system is going to keep organizing itself where people will choose their sources for different types of content. And we want to be one of their sources for local investigative news. And we want to help them figure out their own personalized news feed so that it includes really good stuff from other places as well. And so we help them do it. We give classes all the time on social media, and we did a big workshop on what types of fake news there are, how you evaluate whether something's fake news or the different accusations and such. And so I don't think we'll ever get in a position where we'll pass things along. If we get more funding, my goal would be to actually get some reporters in DC, but more to really hold our representatives in DC accountable. Same thing with Sacramento. I would love to have a reporter in California's state capital, Sacramento. California is a state with 40 million people. It's a vast economy, and the government there is trying to do things like universal health care and stuff. So I would love to hold our own representatives there more accountable. But we'll never be something that passes through network stuff. On your point about our own integrity, so that's the value of actually having as many different sources of revenue as possible, so that we have had instances where people are angry. I mean, like I said today, I had to respond to somebody who was going to not donate anymore because she was upset about our stories. And that's why it's so important to have as many different people as possible, because not only does that help you with money, but that helps you with independence as well if one of them falls off. I actually take it as a sign of health if we can lose one of those sponsors and still thrive and survive. So that's our dream, is to be as diverse as possible.
I would like to know, I'm in Baroda and I'm based with the Buds. It's also a regional newspaper. And, so I'm kind of, because I have a question which is connected to our newspaper too. How do you think can you motivate your staff in times of change when you have to let people go? Because we've had like several rounds of people being let go, and it was kind of very hard on people's motivation and very hard on, just basically on staying positive and staying kind of, and being passionate about the work you do. So
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
What's your experience with that?
To me, it's about having the courage to be vulnerable and transparent, and to recognize how important it is to lean into that and use it as a strategy for motivation. I think that too often when these cuts and changes happen, there's this infantilization of the reporters and the staff that's like, oh, you don't need to know, or you're going to be fine, or it's all okay, and we have a plan, we're not going to tell you about it. And I think that governments go through this a lot too, like, it's all fine, we've got it taken care of, as opposed to like embracing that, no, there's a huge problem that we're dealing with, and here's what we're doing to deal with it, here's where you can have a role in that. And so I find that the newsrooms that are really depressed and really scared right now do not know what the problems are, do not know what they can do about them, and do not know what the hope is or the plan is. And so what I really try to do, and not always successfully, but is be honest and try to, because I think when I had our own financial problems in 2011, I think the reason that happened and had to happen the way it did was because I was too afraid to admit that there was something wrong, right? And so by the time it became clear that we had to do something about it, the physics of the situation were not going to permit any other outcome. I had to surprise a lot of people with the changes that we made. And what we did is we switched that vulnerability to a strength, where we told the community, like, look at what we had to do when we didn't have enough money. This is what we're hoping to do now. Here's how you can help. Here's how our reporters are here's what they're hoping to do and what you should do to invest in them. Because then the struggle becomes an opportunity, as opposed to an embarrassment. And I feel like the places that have the least amount of motivation to address that are the places that don't have that confidence that they can deal with the vulnerability that they have.
And like in that case, if people are not very honest and they're not very open, it would kind of definitely affect the quality of work.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not motivated. They're looking for other jobs. You know, when Trump was elected, there were a lot of. I mean, we're in San Diego. San Diego voted 70% for Hillary Clinton. The people who were most upset about the outcome that called me that night were Republicans, because they had been independent Republicans with a California sort of perspective, and they were worried about what this meant for their own future, right? So there's a very widespread like anti-Trump feeling in San Diego. There's plenty of Trump fans. They would, if they're watching, they would see that. But they would. But the point being, like, there was a lot of concern, and especially among journalism, like, what is he going to try to do? What's the authoritarian angle? Is there going to be actual like problems? And I had to tell them, I'm like, look, if you want to pursue something on the national scale or in a different way, like, go ahead. Like, here we can control what we can control, which is let's do the best possible investigative and public accountability and informative stuff here, and let's be into it together. And if you want to pursue something else, like, go ahead. But I think having a constant conversation with everybody and making sure that, like, they know where we're at, they know the problems that we faced and what we're trying to do about them. So one of the things that happened this year, that membership system we created, it's got its own app, and we started serving other nonprofit news organizations, and they started paying us to use it and to use the system. And so now we've spun off, our whole business team almost is going to a new organization that we're spinning off that's going to be run underneath this Institute for Nonprofit News, which we helped set up years ago. And so that's causing a lot of consternation and worry among because they've raised $1 million now for other news organizations. They're working with some high-profile people like The Intercept and Marshall Project and a few others around the country. And these are all nonprofit news outlets that are trying to do the same thing we're doing, build these membership ranks. And so our business staff leaving, like, that's one way I could just say, oh, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay. But now I'm bringing everybody in and saying, like, hey, we're gonna rebuild this. It's gonna be an exciting time, but we really have to, like, lean into those vulnerabilities. I think that's really important for newsroom managers in particular, because the journalists have been isolated from the business side for so long that they're unequipped to reckon with their own futures, and I think that has to change. They have to be confronted almost brutally with the realities of how bad it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, I could comment on it, but I don't. Maybe someone else wants to say something to it. Like, basically, I think, you know, something I was thinking about also. Maybe it's a bit philosophical, but basically, journalism as a profession has been around maybe for 200 years or so. So before, of course, we had very different, like, cultural and societal structures, but this is also something which is going to change a lot, and getting democratized a lot. So, and the ways we can spread information is changing so much, so we do not know what will happen. We basically really do not know, and it's, you know, the question is, okay, like how, like, what is the time span we can talk about when we speak of a trend? Is it 200 years or is it something else?
Yeah.
And it's just things that it depends very much on the perspective and very much on, basically what are people's preferences, how are they going to consume things?
Right.
Because now it's really kind of, the market value of information has changed, and so it's kind of very competitive, but at the same time very unpredictable. So
I feel like we had this 30 or 40 year fluke in our country, at least in the United States, where a lot of money could be made in newspapering, and therefore this public service could be subsidized by it. And that's been completely destroyed. And our only hope is to do things that are so good and so interesting that people want to pay for them in some way. And whether that's through membership like what we're doing, or whether that's through an actual payment for a product that you get, it has to be so good that it stands out, because that's our only hope. And I don't know that we have a lot to rest that hope on, right? Like it's kind of messy.
I think it's a totally new approach, because basically before, for example, in Germany, like after the war, like having or getting a newspaper or the license to print a newspaper was just like the license to print money.
Exactly.
And basically they were financed like not by journalism itself, but especially by the ads that you could put into the newspaper and into the magazines. So the model that you're creating or you've created is kind of very new, I think, in time, and we have to see how it goes. So basically I just said like 200 years that the profession is old. We just don't know, like, because some people, the argument is that I hear quite a lot is people say, okay, journalism and information is something people always need and crave, but the question is now that people can travel so much, people can, you know, connect so much with other people and into groups and so on, what kind of information would they need?
Yeah, well, and also
and
what scares me is that when local investigative journalism is lost, like when somebody does a great investigative piece on a water district or a city council, everyone values it. They're so excited, they say thank you, they send cards, there's a lot of perceived value of it. But if it disappears, nobody knows it's gone, right? It's not something that I mean, somebody does, people who watch these things do, but the vast majority of people have plenty of other things they can read every day, that they don't sit there and think they actually think there's too much coming at them. And so our value of investigative journalism is something like, people don't even know that it's not being done. You know, sometimes they just assume that some of these places are being covered, and we all have to be, in my opinion, advocates saying, like, you can't just assume that this is going to be taken care of to the whole world. And then you have to make it as entertaining as possible. And it's horrible.
But then how elite, if I may use that terrible word,
Sure.
is your audience?
Yeah, it started really elite. Now it's diversifying a lot more, and I'm proud of that. Our coverage of schools in particular has helped with that, in underserved areas. Arts has helped with that, covering but no doubt it starts with the elites, that they're the first to recognize that there's something being lost that they need to deal with. And they're the ones that have capital to invest in that problem. And they're the ones, and then so that's a risk that we all face, is when we create something for them, then it's easy to make them happy and to forget what you have to do to reach other people. And that's something we all have to go through, especially with this Trump phenomenon. I think it is teaching us that there's a great hostility to elites. I grew up in rural Colorado, and it's hard for me to be classified among the coastal elites now. I mean, everybody's like, I hang out with a lot of people who say, like, I can't imagine who's voting for Trump, and I'm like, I can. I mean, they're my whole family. But I recognize that we aren't doing enough to make it relevant, and we weren't doing enough to make it relevant to them, so that they could follow it like a story, like they follow so many other things. Like how come we can't make it as engaging as that? And I think that's the key. By also explaining what we're trying to do all the time, I think that really helps, because people don't want you to just talk and lecture them like God. They want you they want to go through an experience with you, maybe, though. And you just have to, I don't know, that's our goal. We have to go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. I have one more important question. Tomatoes and sandwiches, yes or no?
You saw that?
No, I talked to you about.
Oh, okay. I am anti-tomatoes on sandwiches. I feel like they destroy a sandwich, and I love tomatoes. I think they're wonderful. I just think that they're just way too dominant on a sandwich. And we get a lot of trouble. We talked about it on our podcast, and it became a big joke in the community.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.